panellists have agreed, and Peter as well, to be so kind. We'll open it up for questions from the floor. We've got about 20 minutes.
Thanks very much to the panel for a really exciting and very reassuring discussion around innovation. My name is Sarah De Freitas. I'm at Murdoch University. So the question I have for the panel is around ICT skills. You might have seen the recent Australian Computer Society report around the ICT skills gap. I think they're predicting 200,000 jobs that we won't have in Australia. What are the suggestions for the panel about how we can actually close that gap? And how do you see the role of bringing together academia and industry as part of the solution?
I think it's a really good point. I put ICT into a similar bucket actually as STEM. Yes. I think they're very related. For me, I kind of see, and I've got young kids coming through high school as well, and you know the push to not do math or not do ICT because, geez, it's just not cool. We need to change that approach around, ICT is the implementation of STEM in the real world, and connecting that through business and through whatever means we can as parents as well, that it isn't not cool. It's actually a way to a future job that really takes some of the math and puts it into practice, some of the physics into practice. And connecting the success stories, I think, is the way to solve the ICT gap. I think there's plenty of courses you can do. You can educate yourself very easily. It's providing that attraction, I think, is something we can do a better job of.
And in our sector, I think this is massively important because health and medical research has undergone a revolution in the last few years, which is fueled by the genomics revolution. The fact that we can now take any one of your cheek cells and within a day we can get your entire genetic sequence for less than $1,000. And the amount of data we are now dealing with is extraordinary. It's trillions of pieces of information. And so the capacity to sort out that information and figure out what it means has led to a whole new field of informatics. And for us, it's bioinformatics, which leads to what we call computational biology. In other words, making sense of that information in terms of what it means for the molecules in a cell. And so what we used to call wet lab research, which is experiments with test tubes, etc., is increasingly becoming conducted in front of a computer, dealing with extraordinary amounts of data, which is where the kit, like the supercomputers, are incredibly important. But in the end, you need the brains to sort it out. And I couldn't agree more that this, and a lot of the people who come into those fields come from disciplines such as mathematics. They don't come from a biology background.
Thank you. The gentleman in the middle.
My name's Peter Liebman. I'm the director of the Harry Perkins Institute. Just a couple of comments and a question. The first is, I've got a couple of chairs advertised at the present time globally, and the one thing I never say is that we're isolated. What I say is that we're in the same time zone as 60% of the world's population, and I can get to Singapore quicker than I can go to Brisbane, and we are brilliantly located for the next 30 or 40 years. And a couple of the panellists said we're isolated. That's gone from my vernacular, and I think that we need to start thinking that we are brilliantly located in the world for science, and to milk the Southeast Asian, the Asian PAC region in a way we're not currently doing. Second thing is, Premier, I share that vision of Texas Medical Centre growing right up in the Charlies campus between UWA. It is an extraordinary opportunity for us to grow. I've also visited there, the Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic. They're incredible opportunities predicated on very high quality health, very high quality medical research, and also substantial commercialisation through Linear and bringing Big Pharma already here. But that's for another day. What I did want to do was bring you back to the original figures that Peter presented. There's clearly a big roadblock. We do great innovative science in Western Australia and in Australia. We are absolutely not commercialising that. And I want the panel to get, or maybe think about the Israeli phenomenon. And if you think about what they do, you've sort of said it in part. Failure is not an issue. 10 failures for one that gets up. But we're not investing to really get across the valley of death. We're not actively investing in that space, and we don't have the philosophy to invest in that space, because we've been able to get our ROI in 3 years so easily from going beneath the ground. So I'd really ask the panel, if I may, to address this question, because it's still the big elephant in the room that we really haven't addressed today.
Just one observation on that. Sorry, applause I think is maybe welcome for those comments. But the issue really is, I don't think our banking sector has any particular need or interest in investing in startups. It's very secure, it makes excellent returns, and it's pretty much free of competition. So I think that is a real problem. You and I can get a mortgage without any problem. Get a $1 million mortgage in an hour by in a phone call. Want $10,000 to support a bright idea as a business loan? Forget it. Personal loan, yes. So I think that is one of the real fundamental issues when we compare ourselves to other jurisdictions. It is the private funding sector rather than the public funding. I think is the big problem. There are other problems, mindset problems I think as well. But I think that's pretty key to my way of thinking. Others may have more informed views than that.
I think the question, and I'm one of those who said we're isolated, and I did preface that by saying our geography is important, and I couldn't agree more that the connections north are a wonderful opportunity. I think to get to this question of it's okay to see failures, one of the things we have to do as heads of academic organisations is figure out how to mix that with the current funding model for people's careers, which is that if you fail, you don't get your grants, and therefore you don't have a career. And we therefore need to figure out within, whether it's in a public funding model, how we deal with that better, but I think also how we bring other sources of dollars into the equation, so that when you partner with a startup, for example, that maybe that's the source of funding to ensure that people are encouraged to take chances, to fail, so that eventually one of them will succeed. But right now, the typical researcher in my institution is focused on essentially playing it safe so that they can get their publications and maybe get a grant or two and then have a job next year. And that's not really a model that accords with an innovative concept or mindset.
I can just follow up on that a little bit. I think there are serious issues in Western Australia in terms of funding at that valley of death, Pete. The angel investor are trying here in Western Australia, but it's not nearly as mature as anywhere else. Venture capital is a serious problem, as Colin alluded to. And the Premier suggested that the government could play a role in that space. And if you look at the UK, they've created the catapult system there, and the catapults is where government is actually coming in and de-risking projects for industry. So in Australia, we've set up the industry growth centres, which are a micro version of the catapults, right? But there are a number of steps, I think, that we can take to actually improve the opportunities in getting over the valley of death. But boy, we're taking baby steps at the moment.
Gentleman to my right. No? We've got the microphone.
At the back, someone waving.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Peter Kastrzak from Innovate Australia. There is a great quote attributed to past CEO of CSIRO: "If Australia only knew what Australia knows." And the idea is that, look, basically all of us in this room probably interested in innovation, which is safe to say, but there is so much happening actually in Western Australia. Excuse me, and we were discussing these things with Professor Peter Klinken on a number of occasions, that most of us don't know exactly what's happening. So my question basically is addressed to the panel about finding out ways that we can promote those ideas. Examples, POSI Supercomputing Center, Hive at Curtin, SKA. A lot of people on the street have no idea that we have those institutions, and we should be proud because that's on cutting edge technology. To give you a great example, and I'm grateful actually Peter Littman spoke earlier, next week we have free networking event called Medical Innovation Network at the Perkins Institute, and with Professor Peter Klinken and Professor Peter Liebman actually speaking, and I bet you that most of you didn't know about it until now. Yeah, so, you know, that's a great example. Like, I think it would be great if we have ways, and I don't want to put anybody on the spot, but if you can come up maybe with ideas, how can we have the communication better? Every relationship needs good communication. So if you want to spread this idea of innovation, we definitely have to communicate better between academia, government, and business. And so that's my question. But before I sit down, I have to say very quickly, two people here, which is Professor Lynn Bisley and Professor Peter Klinken, our past chief scientists and current chief scientists. They're absolutely incredible when it comes to actually supporting innovation. And I know because we worked with them for many years. And can I ask you to give a big hand of applause, please?
Would anyone like to tackle that?
Well, I'll just have a little go. We don't, I mean, the question is how much information do people need to know before they can get behind the notion that we are a smart and innovative state. And it's most probably not an awful lot. But I think we most probably do, perhaps collectively need to do a little bit better at celebrating some major sort of science and innovation achievements, rather than a massive sort of publicity sort of campaign. That's one observation. The other thing, of course, is that there is continual communication through social media, which really does link people who are in the innovation space the whole time. And so there's maybe earlier comments around, you know, generational differences, that is actually the way I think that people are finding out what's going on, and they rapidly adopt whatever technology there is. And a lot of it is in the development of apps, which in themselves, I tend to agree with the Premier. Is that science, or is it? It's definitely innovation, and certainly the business model, the businesses they create are innovative businesses like Uber. But the information around those gets around like wildfire. And so there's some self-generation, but maybe a bit better at celebrating the major achievements.
Thank you. We'll just take one last question here to my left.
Good afternoon. Nick Northcott from Telethon Kids Institute, COO, so I work for Jonathan. My question is cheeky to you, Peter Klinken. If you could make one big bet, if you could really make one big thing that would drive innovation in this state, take a risk, what would that be, and what would you practically do to actually drive that through our economy and diversify our economy? Thank you.
Glad he asked you, Peter.
Jesus.
Thought you were going to get away with just cheering it, didn't you, Peter?
I was having a good time up till then. Oh, thanks, Nick. One big thing. Well, I think there is a screaming gap between academia and industry, and there needs to be locations. There need to be places where you can actually have academics move into an environment that allows them to be more entrepreneurial. I've just been to Oxford and to Cambridge and had a look at their science parks, and I think that's lacking here in Western Australia. I think that's something that we can put in place, and it would assist us taking those basic fundamental discoveries to the next step, which then needs to go to the next step towards final implementation and to commercialisation. So if there's one thing that I could do, that's probably it. Very good. Without any pressure, Premier. I'll talk to you next week about it.
Thanks, Peter. I'd like to now invite Kimberly Dripps to the stage to propose a vote of thanks.